have a rhetorical question for all of you who are parents. How would you respond if one of your children came up to you and said, I want you to do for me whatever I ask of you? How would you even feel? If you were a boss and had employees and one of your employees came up to you and said, I want you to do for me whatever I ask of you. Yeah. Or if you were a teacher, one of your students came up to you and said, I want you to do for me whatever I ask of you. How would you respond? I mean, the list could go on. How would you feel? And yet that's what James and John did. That's what they asked of Jesus, not just anyone. And that's not all. You know, last week we heard the story of the rich young man. That flows into this story about James and John. But there are 4 verses that connect the 2 stories that we don't hear. But they're very important verses. Jesus, to end his last teaching about the rich young man, says, many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. And then it says that Jesus and his followers then went on the way up to Jerusalem. And along the way, Jesus took the 12 aside. And he said to the 12, look, the chief priests and the scribes, they're going to condemn me to death. They're going to hand me over to Gentiles who will mock me, spit upon me, beat me, and put me to death. And on the 3rd day I will rise. Now we enter into this story. And what are the first words that James and John say? Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Is it just me? What were they thinking? I'll tell you what they were thinking. They were thinking about themselves. They weren't thinking about Jesus. They weren't thinking about others. They were thinking about themselves, their ambitions. You know, in Mark's gospel, Jesus tells his disciples not once, not twice, but 3 times this prediction about his upcoming death. In chapter 8, chapter 9, and now in chapter 10. This was the final time. In the first time when Jesus says this, he follows that by saying, if you wish to be my disciple, then you must deny yourself. Take up your cross and follow me. See, that's what discipleship is about, and that's what Jesus is reminding them as they're heading towards the cross. It's not about position or ambition or glory or fame. Of all things, it's about service. You know, service and suffering, Jesus is reminding us in Mark's gospel, go hand in hand. And when you think about it, it's true. When you serve someone, you're sacrificing yourself. You are, in a sense, putting suffering upon yourself. Because you're putting that other person's needs before yours. You're taking upon that other person's burdens upon yourself. So service must have some sense of sacrifice, some sense of suffering to it. And the same goes with those who suffer. They can put their suffering in service to others by uniting it with the sufferings of Christ. And Jesus is reminding us yet again that that's what discipleship is about. I have come not to be served, but to serve. And to even give my life as a ransom for many. You know, I remember an article I read a long time ago. I don't have it anymore, but I remember it in my head. I even remember the name of the author, J. Allen Peterson. And he was sharing about something that happened to him when he was a boy. After school, he would usually dilly-dally and take his time coming home. And he would be late. His father sat him down one night and told him, "Look, if you do this again, I'm going to have to give you some sort of punishment. If you do this again, you're late coming home from school, then for your dinner, you're only going to have bread and water." Well, for a few days it worked, but then finally he was late again, and this time later than usual. His mother met him at the door, but she didn't say anything. His father met him in the living room, didn't say anything. Went to his room, and when dinner came, he came down, sat at the table, and his heart sank because there was a plate with just a piece of bread and a lonely glass of water. And he looked at his mom and dad, and they had full plates of food. And he was hungry. Well, his father let it sink in just long enough. And then what his father did is he took his plate full of food and put it in front of his son, and took his son's plate and put it in front of himself. And the author said that from that point on, he always knew what God was like. He had a clear understanding of what God was like from what his father did by taking the punishment that was due to him for himself. I want that image to sink in for all of us today. Because that's what Jesus did for us. I came not to be served, but to serve and to give my life for you. And if you wish to follow me, then you must do the same. Deny yourself. Take up your cross. Think of others even before yourself. And follow me. May the Lord then give us that grace each and every day as we respond to that same question that Jesus asked of James and John. Can you drink of this cup? Can you be baptized in that baptism? Of which we in turn will say, yes, we can. And yes, Lord, I will follow you. Give me the grace then to deny myself and take up the cross that you have given as an example for us. And help me to follow you.